Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this opportunity. Commissioners, I have taken part in this Royal Commission and provided evidence based on my lived experience of the Hospitaller Order of St John of God over a period of many years. So thank you for allowing me to be a core witness. This case study has been about how, over decades, a group of religious men called the Hospitaller Brothers were enabled by the New Zealand local Catholic Church to enter your beautiful country, to take up residence in Christchurch, to establish a boarding school for boys who suffered neurodiversity or psychobehavioural issues, take fees from parents and grants from your government and groom the general public, including the local church, into supporting them, only to then commit what we have heard in this commission many times, the most heinous of crimes against children, leaving them for dead. In the course of this inquiry, you have heard many recounts of childhood abuse by those who were sexually, physically, spiritually, emotionally abused as children within faith-based institutions. And I have met many of these victims personally, and I honour each and every one of you who has come forward. In particular, I remember those St John of God victims whom I have met and spent much time with. And I thank you for being so faithful to yourself and to the other boys that you grew up with in such a strong way. Commissioners, my evidence is not simply about the criminal destruction of children's lives or about the effects on children when they grow into adults. What I really wanted you to know is how a worldwide Catholic organisation can collude unnoticed to allow such cruelty to take place. You need to understand how this was not prevented before it started, how it was not stopped when identified, and how the disbelief of some victims continues to this day. Commissioners, the Catholic Church in New Zealand engaged a group of untrained religious strangers to educate children in need of care. These men then used and abused their power, destroyed the lives of children, and then discarded them. I would hope that the New Zealand government is very certain that it is heavily committed to ensuring that this cruelty inflicted upon children cannot ever happen again. This is not just a dark chapter in the history of New Zealand. This is an opportunity to write a new book, a different story, one that's built on the absolute insurance that the dignity of every New Zealand child will be safeguarded. I found out for myself what it was like to be enculturated into a system called the Hospitaller Order of St John of God that I once trusted, whose values I even admired and looked up to, only to have many attempts made by them in a continuing way at eroding my professionalism, my trust broken, and my reputation and standing used and then abused by these master perpetrators. You saw evidence of this yesterday for yourself at this commission. The vicious and cruel behaviour to which they refer belongs to them. If I, as a mature professional woman, fell into the grasp of these men without seeing what I see now, what hope would a child have of escaping grooming and abuse? What hope does any victim have of being believed and shown true dignity? What hope will any child have in the future to be carefully and safely cared for and properly tended to? If someone with the resources that I have was seduced into believing that these men attempted to live their espoused values of poverty, chastity, obedience, and hospitality, then how might an innocent child desist? Their displays of attempts to protect their outrageous wealth, their deviant sexual behaviour, their obedience to closing ranks, and their hostile displays of cold and inhospitable treatment of victims to this day is indefensible and unforgivable. Commissioners, I have listened to and read the sham apologies to victims made by these brothers and many other Catholic Church representatives over a period of many, many years. They continue to live in ideological hiding places, and I feel aghast that you, the people of New Zealand, the Catholic people of New Zealand, the parents of those abused, the counsellors, the social workers, signers, doctors and nurses, victim supporters, journalists, lawyers, and people who work in inquiry rooms such as the one you are in now, have never been addressed or acknowledged or apologised to in any way for having to listen to and deal with the cruel disinterest and dishonesty of this religious order. The trauma itself of hearing such testimonies must have paid enormous effect to anybody tuning in. That has never been addressed or apologised for. This in itself, to me, as an expert in post-traumatic stress and its effects, is evidenced by the empathic charade that you have witnessed over the past days of this inquiry by the apologists who have appeared here. It is also evidenced by the absence at this commission of those key brothers who were in charge of things in the 1970s and 1980s and who are still alive today and who have failed to provide any comment or recount of why they did not intervene. They have not been asked for statements. The St John of God brothers have fashioned for themselves a capacity to hide from the challenges of the real world and from the detritus they have left behind in New Zealand as a consequence of their criminally reckless involvement in the Maryland school. Their genuineness, in my view, evaporates in the intense heat of serious examination, which now means that the old cliches just do not stand up anymore. New Zealand victims do not ask for their prayers. They ask for ongoing action and justice towards righting the wrongs of the past in a human way, right now and in an enduring manner. Systemic abuse happens when good people place their trust in organisations and believe and hope that they stand for good, not for evil. Systemic abuse continues to take place when it is in the very DNA of the culture of the organisation. The St John of God brothers demonstrate that they have a kind of organisational amnesia, and sadly, many Catholic orders have caught it too. They seem to have found a collective mute button worldwide. Such an abusive culture installs a filter on the lens that they use to see victims as they truly are. They install a damper, some blinders, some organisational earplugs, and then they take a nap. The St John of God Brothers, as a worldwide organisation, seem to have a need to erase these stories in each and every country they operate, misplace the tapes, zoom out and slowly dissolve to black. Their slow burning secrets involve the blurring and pixelating of these facts. Commissioners, I implore those in power in New Zealand, especially your government, to listen deeply to all I have said and to listen to these victims and their advocates. The psychological toll accrued in your New Zealand communities is immense. The level of criminal activity must never be allowed to happen to children in New Zealand, and I have heard that many times today. The second injury, which victims, including all secondary and tertiary victims, continue to suffer to this day, and as witnessed by this Royal Commission of Inquiry, requires serious attention. To victim advocates and supporters, especially the network of survivors and their supporters in New Zealand, I urge you to continue this most important of work. To all victims and to those who have experienced, witnessed and continue to witness this systemic abuse, whose voices still have not been heard, I say this: come forward, protest, approach the police or this commission. Continue to demand that your needs are met later in life because they were never met when you were a child. Do not be afraid to speak. Be very afraid of what will happen to the whole of this most uncomfortable truth if you do not. Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Michelle. Dr. Mulvihill, we're very grateful indeed, as I said before, for your contribution to this hearing, to your evidence that you gave the other day, and thank you for that very stirring and thought-provoking submission, which we will take very much to heart. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.